In the Yoga Aphorisms, Patanjali teaches that we are capable of reaching a state of awareness in which we can perform miracles. He counsels us to be unafraid of transcending the limitations imposed upon us by the material world. Patanjali's words caused me to truly think of myself as capable of living at a much higher level than I had ever even considered before. I felt urged to go beyond traditional ideas, which acted as obstacles to my union with God. Patanjali offered hundreds of specific suggestions and practices to reach the oneness or union with God, which he called yoga. Here are 5 aphorisms that can help you to gain access to your spiritual answers. I have arranged these 5 major themes in a way that I found useful for myself, and I trust will be helpful to you. The first aphorism: the central act of ignorance is false identification. Patanjali describes ignorance as a basic misunderstanding of one's real nature. When we identify ourselves as our name or our title, our body, our possessions, achievements, or reputation, we are denying our true identity. What we are exploring here is ignorance defined as falsely identifying oneself as only of the material, ego-based world. Replace that false identification with imagining yourself eternally connected to a divine source. With this new identification comes an inner resolve to reorient yourself when faced with a problem. The spiritual journey does not consist in arriving at a new destination where a person gains what he did not have or becomes what he was not. It consists in the dissipation of his ignorance concerning himself and life, and the gradual growing of that understanding which begins with spiritual awakening. The finding of God is a coming to one's own self. Patanjali's second aphorism: the mind of the truly illumined is calm because the peace of God within all things is known, even within the appearance of misery and disease. This second aphorism brings to mind the adage that the 3 truly difficult things to do in life are returning love for hate, including the excluded, and saying, "I was wrong." If it requires stillness to know God, then we need to be in a place of loving calmness in order to be able to have God's assistance in problem solving. But how do I get to that place of calmness? I believe you can move into that state of knowing God by intentionally choosing calmness in moments of anxiety or fear. Yes, you can choose to be calm at any moment by reminding yourself that you are no longer choosing to live by your conditioned past. You see your world in the terms of an infinite game. You will smile more frequently. You will feel serene. You will access spiritual solutions. The third aphorism of Patanjali: sin is non-existent. There are only obstacles to one's ultimate union with God. Most of us grew up believing that a sin was an act of disobedience or ingratitude toward a God who is both separate and punitive. Behavior which religion has taught us is sinful is conduct which is away from God. This, according to Patanjali, is not a reason to immerse ourselves in guilt and use up life energy attempting to somehow make amends. Rather, it should be viewed in the context of an obstacle that we have yet to overcome. The concept of being a sinner is an image of self-contempt and guilt, while the concept of encountering an obstacle is empowering. We have been trained to think in terms of sin and punishment. The empowering way is to view trials as lessons and opportunities to choose differently. The sinner, filled with guilt, becomes immobilized and remains in passive inertia. When we view the sinful behavior as an obstacle to a higher level of awareness, we can still take responsibility by asking ourselves, what is the lesson for me, and what can I do to avoid this the next time? Patanjali's fourth aphorism: the person who is steadfast in abstaining from falsehood has the power to obtain for himself and others the fruits of good deeds without having to perform the deeds themselves. Normally, when we use the word truthful, we imply that a person's words correspond to the facts of which he speaks. Yet in this Yoga Sutra, steadfast in abstaining from falsehood means something quite apart from being factual. What is meant here is the practice of completely and wholly identifying oneself as a spiritual being, united with God at all times, and never confusing one's identity with the ego world of possessions, achievements, and reputation. In this state, we find ourselves gaining those fruits of good deeds. They will enable us to not only resolve our own problems, but those of others as well. Open yourself to an idea which allows you to gradually remember your identity as a connected to God entity. The more steadfast you are in this regard, the more you will hear others say, "I just feel better when she is around. I feel calm when he shows up." You literally raise the consciousness of those around you. We begin to see the fruits of good deeds appearing without having to work at it. Ultimately, we are close to the top and find that there are others just wanting to bathe a bit in our aura, so to speak. Let in this idea that you can access divine spiritual power to alleviate problems first for yourself and then for others. And finally, Patanjali's fifth aphorism, my favorite. When a person is steadfast in his abstention from harming others, then all living creatures will cease to feel enmity in his presence. Patanjali's statement, abstention from harming others, includes not only actual acts of harm, but also thoughts of jealousy, judgment, and injury. Steadfastly renouncing violence in thoughts and in all dealings with others creates an atmosphere wherein violence and enmity ceases to exist because it is not reciprocated. Any situation where you experience anger or even mild discomfort involves thoughts of enmity toward the other person or people. Other people will not feel enmity or anguish if you steadfastly abstain from having harmful thoughts toward them in the first place. Amazing! By you working at not having any judgments or harmful thoughts, those around you will be free of anguish also. Problems are illusions of the material world. Solutions are attributes of your immersion in the world of spirit. As you face a problem, remind yourself that you created it with one mind, and you will solve it with another.
And you've got to understand the 7 words, I think, that were most important ever strung together came out of Proverbs in the Old Testament. As you think, so shall you be. As you think, so shall you be. Now, it doesn't say, as you be, so shall you think, even though that's how most of us run our lives. Those words are really all-out crucial, because once you get it and understand that what you think about is what expands, as you think, so shall you be is what rules the universe. Once you know it, not just believe it, but once you know it, then you start getting real careful about what you think about. Real careful. Because all of those thoughts, all of those doubts are the things that will manifest themselves into your life. Now, it's real simple matter to shift around and begin to pay attention first to the spirit, the invisible side of you, and secondly, to the physical part of you. Most of us don't do that. And it's such a simple matter, I can give you just like a real brief example of how it works. Most of us are as you be, so shall you think kinds of people. So that when things happen to us in the physical world, whatever they may be, we allow our inner world to be affected by them. And so between my office and my home, it's a 17-mile drive that I make every day, twice a day. Now, there was a time when I would get in my car, when I was an as you be, so shall you think kind of person, when I didn't understand the simple words that James Allen wrote in the last century when he said, "Circumstances do not make a man, they reveal him." The circumstances of our life reveal the kinds of choices that we've been making. And I used to get in my car and drive to my home, and depending upon how the traffic went, or whether there was construction, or whether there were delays, or whether there were difficulties, or struggles, or problems, I would then allow my mood at home to be determined by that. And then I learned how to shift that, and how to first begin to visualize in my mind what it is that I wanted this trip to be like for myself. And I do this every day now before I get in the car. I get a picture of how it's going to be in the next half an hour. Very peaceful. It takes me about a minute and a half. 2 or 3 deep breaths. This is going to be a peaceful, wonderful trip home. I'm not going through any yellow lights. The little lady who drives that 1977 Cadillac in the left-hand lane, she's had the seat removed from her car. She sits on the floorboard and you can just see this little head sitting up there. She has signed an oath to drive around aimlessly, delay me. She's in divine order. She's exactly where she belongs. I'm going to bless her today instead of being mad at her. I'm going to understand that this is a perfect universe and that it's all in order and that I don't have to rush. And if there's construction, it's supposed to be there. There's no accidents. There's no accidents. And I'm going to take my time and I'm just going to be very peaceful all the way home. As you think, so shall you be. And then I get in the car, and there she is, sure enough, about 2 miles from the house, and I waved, and I thank you for being here. If I were to try to go around you like I used to, I would probably have a head-on collision, or there's an officer there to give me a traffic ticket or whatever. I bless you for being there. And I get home, and I don't go through any lights, any yellow light. Don't rush, don't change lanes. Very peaceful. And I get home at the same time every day. Same time as I used to, only I'm now allowing myself to understand a very simple premise.
How we perceive something within ourselves, in the environment within us, how we perceive it can literally take the things that are going on inside of us and alter them and change them. Can you imagine that? So it's like a whole new way of thinking. As you begin to more and more harmonize in this way, what happens is that you start elevating your thoughts so that the habit of how you think becomes more harmonized rather than a polarity with what you want to attract. It becomes harmonized with it, and it becomes your natural way of how you think all the time.
I believe that success is an inner concept. Inner concept. It is something that is part of your own inner development. When you have it inside of you, and you cultivate that, and that's what I want to try to help parents to do with their children. When you carry that around inside of you, you bring it to every single thing that you do in life. Everything that you do. You bring it to your children. You don't get it from raising them the right way. You don't get it by closing the deal. You bring it to every aspect of the deal. You don't get it by focusing on your commission and how much am I going to get, and if I divide this and if I do that, and always being concerned with your own quotas. You get it by forgetting about your quotas and focusing on your customers. You simply go out and advance confidently in the direction of your own dreams and endeavor to live your own kind of life the way you choose, making every day a miracle, and success will chase after you and arrive in your life in amounts greater than you ever anticipated in any present moment of your life. I use the analogy of the bag boys. There are one baggers and two baggers in the world. The one bagger is the bag boy in the store who, when he's bagging your groceries, he's sort of tired and he's sort of got a real bad attitude about what he's doing, and he's only getting a few dollars an hour, and he picks up a loaf of bread and puts it on the bottom and put a few tomatoes down there to keep it nice so that the bread and tomatoes mix nice when the can of grapefruit juice goes on top of it or whatever, and he doesn't give a damn, and he's slow, and his attitude is that there's no one cashier in the world that I cannot make stop and help me bag an order, even if they've only got one item, all right? That's his philosophy, and he kind of goes and does that. Now, you look at that and you say, well, maybe it's just because he's bagging groceries. that that's what it is. But it's not. You see, because right in the same store, there's somebody else making the same money, who's got the same benefits, who is like a double bagger, and his philosophy is there's no two cashiers in the world that I cannot keep up with. They'll never have to touch a bag. And then there are a few that are triple baggers. I used to be a triple bagger. I worked for Kroger's through my master's bagging groceries. That's what I got through it and paid for it. I used to make a contest and see if I could get 3 cashiers and bag for all 3 of them and say something pleasant to them and have fun. And the hour would go by like that, and the people would always want to come to my lines, and there was that kind of a fun thing. I looked forward to doing it. Now, the one baggers, 5 years later, they get passed over for a job promotion for manager of a store if they're still there. And they go home and they tell their wife that that shouldn't have happened. They passed me over. They're prejudiced. They don't like me because I'm too tall, or I'm too short, or I'm the wrong color, or I'm the wrong size, or I'm a female, or I'm a male, or whatever it is. They've got their reasons, you see. And they go through their whole lives being single baggers. Even up into their retirement years, they're still making excuses and finding fault and blaming the rest of the world for what is. And the double bagger owns a chain of Kroger stores.
Success, again, is an inner process. When you have it inside of you, you're not looking for it. And consequently, you bring success to everything that you do. I've never believed that people who work real hard and do all the right things make a lot of money and then become successful. I think it's the other way around. I think successful people make a lot of money at whatever they do and make a lot of friends and all of that, because the successful person is someone who has it within them, and they bring it to all these different things. And so they're never looking for it, and they're not surprised at how well they do at virtually everything. Goal setting is something that a lot of confusion about. There's nothing wrong with having a goal as long as you don't fall in love with it, and as long as you understand that every step on the way to the achievement of the goal is just as important as every other step, including the one wherein you reach it. That we only get nows, we only get present moments to live, and that to want to be something 5 years from now assumes that you're going to be here then, in this body, in the way that you are living now. And that's a very blatant assumption, that if you always have that 5-year notion, there will come a time when you won't be able to achieve that.
When I said that success is an inner concept, so is happiness, so is love, so is approval. If you think that you're going to find fulfillment if you set a goal out there, and then you work real hard for that goal, and when you get there, you'll finally have it, your life is all this striving. What you need is a psychology of arriving, not striving. You know, you're thinking about what I'm going to do and I'm going to get here. Meantime, every one of these days are your life. This is all you get. So the goals, while there's nothing wrong with goals at all, it's like every step along the way is just as important to savor as arriving here. And if you're only goal-oriented and only striving, you're only about halfway up the ladder of no-limit people. You are always going to suffer from the disease of more if you only have goals to arrive at in the future. Because this becomes your life, this striving. And when you get here, you don't know what to do with this. You don't know how to handle what you've got. So then you upgrade your goal. You say, all right, I'll have 200,000 in the bank instead of 100,000. And now your life becomes more struggling, more suffering, more trying to get there. And you get here, and then all of a sudden you look around and you're an old person. And you say, what happened to my life?
You see, the more you operate from goal setting in the sense of repairing deficiencies, the more your life becomes one of striving. Your life becomes a striving. And when and when you arrive at the place where you want it to be, you don't know how to be there because your whole life has been striving. If it's a week from Thursday, you're looking toward whatever it is, that party or the bank account that you're going to now have the amount of money that you wanted in it, and you finally get there after all the struggling, and then Thursday arrives, you don't know how to deal with that because your whole life has been in anticipation of, and so when you get there, you suffer from this disease called more, and I've got to get more of that.
There are a great many things in the world that we talk about as if they were real, but they are just only judgments. You know, the only difference between a flower and a weed is a judgment. And that's true of people as well. Here's some things that don't exist in the world. Disasters, luck, a dumb bird, a normal attitude, a guarantee, a dreadful dress, a gorgeous hairdo, terrible language, a nice lady, an awful sight, a good boy, a stupid person. These are all judgments. And you have to learn the difference between judging and what is real.
Some of the categories of where people dichotomize and judge are good and bad. They try to put the whole world into what is good and what is bad based upon some perception I have. And those things that don't fit into it the way I think they ought to be are bad, and all the things that I agree with are good. And so you find yourself going through your whole life running into half of the people or more who are doing things in a different way than you do and judging them all to be bad, and therefore being their victim because they now own your emotional strings. Remember, being a victim isn't necessarily a physical thing. In fact, that's very seldom the thing, because we have laws to protect each other from being physically abused by each other. It isn't as if somebody's putting you into a jail, into a cell. It is the victimization is what you experience in your mind and in your emotions. And this comes from judging, from categorizing, from compartmentalizing people and putting them into the compartments. And then when they don't fit with the behavior that you think they should exhibit, you find yourself upset and worked up and angry and hurt. Good and bad and right and wrong and beautiful and ugly. There's no beautiful people in the world. There's no ugly people in the world. People are just the way they are. They look exactly the way they do, the way they're supposed to look. They're part of the perfect intelligence that is in all things in the universe, that invisible intelligence that is within all of us. But if you categorize people that way, then you are finding yourself potentially a victim. It's really important to develop a quiet mind when it comes to all of this. A quiet mind is a mind that is at peace, a mind that doesn't judge. One of the things you learn about judgment is that you do not define anybody else with your judgments. You only define yourself as someone who needs to judge. Just because you label somebody else to be something obnoxious or nasty or hurtful doesn't mean that that's what they are. That's just your judgment, and that's your definition of yourself as someone who needs to judge. People are not defined by your judgments. People are defined by their own thoughts and their own actions that are subsequent to those thoughts. So learning not to judge and unclogging your mind, if you will, of judgments and negativity and quieting your mind. It's like if you could spend an hour a day in meditation. The great French philosopher and scientist Pascal said that all of man's troubles stem from his inability to sit quietly in a room alone. You sit quietly in a room alone and go within and discover that higher consciousness, whatever you want to call it, whether you call it God or soul or spirit or Louise, it doesn't make any difference what you label it. If you go within and discover that and spend time each day inside of yourself, just peacefully being there and asking the questions, how may I serve? And what is my purpose? And what can I do to make this life a better one? And how can I serve people rather than be victimized by them or victimizing anybody else? You find that developing that kind of a quiet, peaceful, serene mind is something that will allow you to process the whole world in a more peaceful way. And when you get to that point where you are aligning yourself spiritually, or you are aligning yourself with the invisible part of your humanity, the part that defies form, that doesn't begin and doesn't end, when you align yourself there, and that becomes your first priority, you start noticing that you don't get victimized as much. I've really noticed that as I've gotten myself on a higher spiritual path and a more peaceful path for myself and more at ease with myself, that I've begun to take much better care of my body, that I notice that when I don't expect people to be abusive towards me, that I hardly ever see it anymore. It's really rare that I see it. I know that when I get in the car and I have a 17-mile ride to go to my home from my office, and there's a lot of traffic lights and there's a lot of traffic and a lot of slow drivers and so on, I know that when I visualize in advance in my mind that this is going to be a very pleasant experience, and I see myself, if somebody's cutting me off in advance, that I see myself not allowing myself to be upset and depressed by that. I see myself going through that whole process of driving all the way home in advance. This is before I've even opened the car. And I sort of play it out in my mind. And then I get in and I just allow the physical now to follow the thought that I just had, the visualization that I just had. And sure enough, somebody will get in there and cut me off or drive slowly or whatever. And for me, it's like I just see them as part of the perfection of it all. They're exactly where they're supposed to be at that moment. I'm no longer a victim. I have aligned myself first with my mind, knowing that I can create in my mind what I want, and then not allowing myself to be victimized when those things occur. And as I do that, I go through my life, I find that as I am more peaceful and I send out more harmony and more love and more forgiveness and more kindness and more of all the things I've been talking about on this tape, if you send that out more, that's what you get back. If you send out hostility and pain and suffering and anger and wanting to make other people wrong and wanting to prove yourself all the time, if you send out that kind of energy from yourself, that's exactly what you're going to get back. Send out love, you'll get back love. Send out anger and impatience, and that's what you'll get. Pulling your own strings truly is about looking within and knowing that no one can make you a victim without your consent. No one. Another erroneous zone that keeps a lot of people immobilized and from moving to higher levels in their life is what I call fear of the unknown, an absence of openness, a prejudice towards never changing, towards staying only with the familiar, towards looking for security as a way of life rather than moving on to new and vital areas to explore. Einstein said the most beautiful thing in all the world is the most mysterious. And yet so many people are afraid to break the barriers of convention and wander into the unknown and try new and exciting things for themselves. They stay only with what they've always known and what they've always done in their life. There's a wonderful Zen saying that says, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And the teacher can be in any form. The teacher can be another human being. It can be a book. It can be a tape like this. It can be anything at all that might show up in your life. But if you're not ready, if you're still stuck, if you're still afraid to try new things and move into new territory, then then it'll go right past you. I know so many things in my life that showed up in my 20s and my 30s that I wasn't ready for. And they were right there, books that I had on my shelf and I've had there for 20 years, and I never even picked them up. And I picked them up and I said, wow, this is fantastic. I didn't know this guy knew that. And it's a book that's 6,000 years old. It's been there, but I wasn't ready. So you have to develop a readiness. And what you have to do is learn how to get rid of the prejudices in your life. And the word prejudice means to prejudge. And I'm not talking just about what we think of as the typical prejudices, which are racial prejudices and things like that. But I'm talking about the willingness to prejudge life, to tell yourself that this is something that I wouldn't enjoy. This is something I couldn't do. This is an activity that just wouldn't work for me. And then it keeps you from trying all of these new and delicious and exciting new things. What I'm really advocating here is an openness to new experience. The more things that you're capable of doing, the more things that you're willing to do, the happier your life is going to be, the more fulfilled you're going to be, and the more you'll be fulfilling the purpose that you're here for in the first place. The fewer things that you can do, the fewer things that you're willing to try, the more rigid your life is, the less happy and the more immobilized you become. So people who can do a lot of things, who have a lot of options, who when they have a picnic are willing to go out and play a little softball, even if they aren't very good at it. They can even, instead of playing third base, maybe they can be third base. Right? So people tag you on their way home. But they're at least willing to get out there and try it and do something, versus the person who sits around and tells themselves that this is just something I can't do. Now, if this doesn't immobilize you and doesn't bother you, then it's not an erroneous zone. But it almost always does. It's a very restrictive kind of thing. So opening yourself up to these, to being able to do and try anything is an exciting way to live your life. There's a thing called security that a lot of people use to keep themselves tied into the known and the familiar. And they really have this belief that there's security, that if you do things a certain way and follow the rules that have been prescribed for you and laid down for you from the time that you were a little child, that you'll have security if you save a certain amount of your money and if you go to work a lot and you do. And the fact is that there is no such thing as security. There's only one kind of security in the world, and that's inner security. Most people are looking for their security in things outside of themselves. They're other-directed rather than inner-directed. The inner-directed person is a person who understands that my secure feelings are just thoughts, and they come from how I feel about myself, and that the physical world doesn't offer any security at all. I mean, we are born into it, and we're here for a short time, and then we die. And when we die and how we die is something that each one of us thinks about and gets concerned about. And what happens to us after we die, there's no security out there. None of us know how much time that we have. The future is a thought. The future is always the future, and it's just a thought. It's just a whimsical kind of invisible, dimensionless, formless, amorphous kind of thing inside of our consciousness that determines whether or not we're secure or insecure. You're not going to get security from having money or from having a lot of power. If power comes from being able to control others, what happens when the others disappear? Your power is gone. If security comes from being glamorous and beautiful and exciting, where is your security when the glamour leaves? And it leaves all of us. If it comes from being able to dominate someone else, if that's what makes you secure, what happens when those people leave? Your security is gone. You see, security is something that you can never get. It's an illusion. And once you know that, then you begin to wander through life and explore the unknown and not be looking for the safe haven.
I wrote a book a few years ago called You'll See It When You Believe It, and there's an entire chapter in there called Detachment. And one of the things that Maslow said and taught us is that self-actualizing people are living their life detached from outcome. Detached from outcome. And detached from outcome means that I don't do what I do because of what might show up for me. I'm not motivated by being famous. I'm not motivated by making money. I'm not motivated by other people's approval. I'm motivated by doing what I love and loving what I do, which I'll be talking about in the second principle. And it's the process of doing it and living it and loving it that appeals the most. And it's very difficult in a world which says that you are what you have, and you are what you do, and you are your accomplishments and your achievements and your acquisitions. When you begin to evaluate yourself on the basis of all of these kinds of things, then attracting those kinds of things becomes the almost paramount motivator of our lives. But to shift away from that, to understand what Thoreau wrote about back there in Concord, Massachusetts, at Walden Pond, when he defined success as advancing confidently in the direction of your own dreams and endeavoring to live the life which you have imagined, then you will meet with a success, unexpected in common hours. And it's one of the most difficult things in Western civilization to get people to understand is that doing what you love and loving what you do is its own reward, and that whatever the universe provides for you in the way of outcome is what you accept. It's fine. So that what you are motivated by is a sense of peace and fulfillment and awareness that I'm doing what I love and loving what I do. And one of the places where attachment shows up most profoundly is in our relationships. That we begin to believe that who we are and our happiness is based upon another person or my family. And there's a wonderful writer who passed away a few years back. His name was Anthony DeMello. He said, the source of all unhappiness in the world is attachment. That if you could learn to detach, and I recommend that you read, You'll See It When You Believe It, that chapter on detachment, because it sort of wrote itself through me. And I have to work at practicing it all the time, having as many children as I have, to understand that I am not the source of their happiness and that they are not the source of mine. And sometimes it sounds almost callous, but this is what he suggests in The Way to Love that'll help you to experience love in a non-attached way. How do you love someone and not be attached to them? And attachment means that I become immobilized if I don't get what it is that I'm seeking.
Attachment doesn't mean that I'm not attracted to you, that I don't love you, that I'm not happy with you, that I don't love things. Detachment is about understanding that if what you would like to have from another person is not available, then you don't become immobilized. And he says here are two tests. First, can you say this to other people in a detached way? I am not really attached to you at all. I am merely deluding myself into the belief that without you, I will not be happy. Can you be in a relationship with anyone, including your own children and family, and be able to say to them that I am deluding myself into the belief that without you, I will not be happy? And the second is, this is the toughest one, I think, of all. One that I've met very few people who are in relationships, love relationships, spousal relationships, and so on, who can pass this test. Be able to say to the person you love, I leave you free to be yourself, to think your thoughts, indulge your tastes, follow your inclinations, and behave in ways that you decide are to your liking. You have that freedom, and you have my love in the process. It's a great test, one that I have failed on many occasions in my life, but I'm working on. I haven't failed it so much with my children. Somehow I think the advantage I had in growing up in the way that I did in a series of foster homes until I was almost 10, and being required to go out and earn my way in life, not having someone hand it to me. Somehow that gave me the ability to allow my children to be what they needed to be, because I don't think I'd be where I am in my life had someone else handed it to me. And I must say it's one of the great conflicts I've always experienced with my children, is how much do I give of the wonderful abundance that has showed up in my life, and how much do I withhold and allow them to create it for themselves. And I have found that most of the time when I give too much and take over for them and do it for them, that not only do they fall, but I find myself suffering more as well. And that when I allow them to figure out a way to create it for themselves, even if they get a little bit upset about it, that generally speaking, they're more at peace, and so am I.
Living the Tao Te Ching, this 2,600-year-old, some people call it the greatest, the wisest book ever written. It speaks so much about relationships. Tao, the word Tao, means the great way. It's really just another synonym for God, or source, or spirit, or that which is the all-creating. And one of the things that it says that was really helpful to me, probably the most helpful thing in it, was that whenever you have a conflict of any kind, in any relationship, whenever you have a conflict, that the person who is willing to be of Tao, of God, of Source, is the one who will practice forgiveness, or will go to the person that they have a conflict with and bring love to it, instead of the freeze out, instead of the anger, instead of the hatred, instead of the revenge, instead of so many of the things that we do when we have conflicts in our lives. We just don't talk to that person. Like, I'm not talking to that. I'm not talking to him. He's going to call me because I called the last time. But the person who lives the Tao life, the life of a higher consciousness, is the person who says, I end all conflicts on love, which is where we all come from. We come from a source that is love. So for me, that has been just so useful. I have 8 children, and that's been just extraordinarily helpful for me to be in a relationship where I can always be of love, where I can just, and so then you don't even, conflicts become something that are no longer present, because conflict requires two-ness.
in order to have a conflict. You have to have two. You have two different opinions or whatever. But if you live in oneness, if you really see yourself in everyone else, see yourself in all the things, including the plants, including the animals, and including all beings and so on. If you just suspend this ego part of you and just see yourself in that other person, then your arguments are really with yourself, and your hatreds are really about yourself. And you begin to really see that I don't have to project anything onto anyone else that isn't what I choose to be. And it's having the curiosity, it's having the willingness to say, this isn't working for me. It's like you get bit by a snake, and you're bit, okay? But the bite doesn't kill you. You're still there. You don't die from a snake bite. You don't die from you don't get hurt from what somebody else does to you. It's the venom that continues to pour through your system after the bite. That's what causes difficulties in relationships and so on. And when you recognize that to be angry, to be full of revenge, I could bring anybody in this crew in here and do a muscle test with them and ask them a question, to hold your arm out like this, and think about somebody who's abandoned you or abused you, who did something that you didn't like, who borrowed money from you and didn't pay it back, who walked out on you, someone that you hate. And just for a moment, hold your arm out as hard as you can. I'm going to put two fingers right here, and I'm going to push down, and you think about getting revenge. You just think about, even if you don't want to do that, just think the thought of, I'm going to get even with that bastard for what he did or what she did. I'm going to really get even with him. And you push, and that you find out that they have no strength when you think a thought of revenge. There's no strength in there. Kinesiology, it's a very simple test. Then what we just demonstrated here is the power of the thoughts that we have. What a thought of shame, a thought of anger, a thought of revenge, what it does to the muscles of our body. The muscles of it's like, the reason I ask you to tell me a lie, is because I wanted to test your body, because your body wasn't made by your parents. We like to think that our bodies were made by our parents. That's because you look a certain way and all of that. But if we take the tiny little drop of protoplasm that created you, and we try to find out its origin, and we take it all the way back to subatomic particles and reduce it, we find out when we put it in a particle accelerator and rev it up at 250,000 miles an hour and collide it, and we open it up, there's nothing there. That you came from the invisible. You came from Source. It's the Spirit that gives life. So that once you understand that this body of yours is a creation not of human beings, but it's a creation of God. It's a creation of Source. It came from nowhere, and an invisible source, and manifested into the world of the physical. And so it only reacts to truth, because it was created by truth. So once you lie, this is an ultimate lie detector test. That's why I always say we could have saved $93 million with President Clinton. It's like, come on. Did you have sex or didn't you? Let's get over this, But now you're using an instrument not of human beings. All of our bodies are divine creations, and they only react to truth with strength. The truth that when you go weak, you're going against your Tao nature. Your true nature is not revenge. Your true nature is not hatred. You came from love, and you have to stay in that state. And once you learn that, once you get that, having that demonstrated could change your life. Just that moment could change forever.
Failure is only bad when you equate it with your self-worth. When you say, because I fail at something, that makes me a failure as a person. The healthiest place you can get to is the place where you're willing to try anything. Healthy people will try virtually anything, and they're not afraid. They don't live by their customs. They don't live by their traditions and the rules and everybody else's dictates. No, not at all. Someone who isn't afraid to fail because they know something very important. When I walked in here today, my self-worth was intact. It comes from myself. That's why it's called self-worth. Now, if you like me, that's nice. And if you applaud, and if you laugh, and if you enjoy, that's terrific. That's better than if you don't. Yeah, I like it a lot better. I love approval. I think it's the most wonderful thing in the world. The difference is I don't need it. If I need it, that means when I don't get it, I collapse. That's what a need is, isn't it? A need, I'll tell you what I need. You take the oxygen out of this room. You know, I'm in trouble. I need oxygen real bad. All right? And I don't mind admitting it. But approval, no problem there. Or somebody else puts you down, or someone doesn't like what you say. And you make their opinion count more than your own self-worth. Self-worth comes from the self. And it comes from the belief about the self that I have integrity, that I am valuable, that I'm attractive, that I'm important. You don't have to go around saying it. You have a quiet kind of love affair with yourself. It's the only self you got.
It isn't that you somehow have to get in there to prove that you can do it. It represents and symbolizes for you moving out of where you're comfortable, because as soon as you do that, then you're opening up new vistas, and more and more and more vistas open up to you. If you find yourself just staying the same way and defining yourself as, well, this is just the kind of person I am, I'm just sort of reserved, and this is how I behave, and this is how I conduct myself, and so on. Instead of that, what you do is you want to look beyond that. You want to say, all right, nothing human is alien to me. The entire range of human experience is available to me. Anything that any human being can do, has ever done, or ever will be able to do, I'm capable of doing. And viewing yourself that way and seeing that, then your zone of comfort becomes the whole expanse of human possibilities. That's what becomes available to you. But when you narrowly define yourself and stay with what is comfortable, whether it's in what you eat, how you relate to people, where you go on your vacations, every aspect of your life is affected by that kind of an attitude. This also applies to the emotional or mental side of your life. Most people go through their life saying, I'll believe it when I see it. Show it to me, let me look at it, then I will believe in it. That's a very narrow way to look at life, because it really restricts you to only being able to perceive and experience and live what you can see. And believe it or not, what you can see is a tiny, tiny, tiny percentage of what's available to you. A different way of looking at that is, I'll see it when I believe it. That is, I am only seeing in my life, and always seeing in my life, what I choose to believe in. See, if you only will believe what you see, then how can you believe in thoughts? And why would you pay your electric bill? I mean, if you can't see it, and nobody can see electricity, then you shouldn't be paying that. And you certainly can't believe that you have a mind, because you can't see your mind, you can't touch your mind, you can't feel it, you can't smell it. It's impervious to the senses. It's a higher part of you. But if you know that just because it's invisible, or just because it's not available to me through my senses, that doesn't mean that it doesn't exist, that it's all out there for me to experience, so that you'll begin to see miracles, for example, in your life, wonderful, phenomenal miracles, more and more of which have cropped up in my life in recent years since I've shifted around my attitude about it. You begin to not only expect them, but you'll see them as a regular part of your life, because your consciousness has changed, because you've gotten out of that comfort zone of only looking at it with what they call your left brain, or with your analytical side, with the side that needs to carve it all up and make it organized and make it neat and make it real clear and easy for us. That's that sort of left brain. But the right brain, which is our intuitive side, which is the creative side, the side of our whole mind and thinking and personality, which is unlimited, which allows us to have an imagination, to be able to create within our own mind. That side is just as important. Both of those sides of us are very important. But if you only restrict yourself over here, you'll always continue to have very, very limited vision in your life. Because if you can't analyze it, if you can't put a formula on it, if you can't dissect it, if you can't insure it, if you can't put it away in a drawer someplace and get your hands on it, then it doesn't exist for you. And boy, does that take away a lot of the range of human experience.
One of my heroes back in the 1840s was a man named Henry David Thoreau. He had a wonderful definition of success. He went to prison, this man, because he refused to pay his taxes to a government that was doing to the people who had been living on this land for 10,000 years, and just removing them in the name of our right to do so because of a piece of legislation signed by President Andrew Jackson in 1830 called the Indian Removal Act. It gave anybody the legal right to just remove people who had a language and an educational system and a history of living there. They were just removed. And Thoreau was so anguished by this in Concord, Massachusetts, that he went to prison, refusing to pay his taxes. And his neighbor's name was Ralph Waldo Emerson. He lived 2 streets over and 7 houses down. Those of you who saw my last PBS special know that I recorded it right there in Concord. And Emerson came to the jail at Concord, and he said to Thoreau, he said, "What are you doing in there? We need you out here." He was beginning the Transcendentalist movement, some of the ideas of which I'll be speaking about here today and tomorrow. And Thoreau reportedly said to him, "Ralph, what are you doing out there?" And Emerson paid his bail, and rather than return to his home, he went to live deliberately in the land in a place called Walden Pond out in western Massachusetts. And he wrote an essay on the necessity of civil disobedience. And this is what his definition of success sounded like in that essay. He said, "If you advance confidently in the direction of your own dreams and endeavors, and endeavor to live the life which you have imagined, you will meet with a success unexpected in common hours." That's a really powerful definition of success. That you have things inside of you called dreams and endeavors, and if you live by them, rather than chasing after what it is that you think you would like to have, if you live by that connection to your source, because our thoughts is the way that God thinks through us. Our thoughts is how God thinks through us. And when our thoughts are in rapport with what it is that spirit is like, everything that the source is capable of doing, you are capable of doing. The greatest teacher who ever came to this planet, who ever walked among us 2,000 years ago, reminded us, after performing miracles and converting water into wine and raising the dead and manifesting the gift of fish and loaves by just his thoughts, the power of his thoughts to attract into our lives whatever it is that he would think about. Such was the energy level at which this man lived, this being lived. He said, "Even the least among you can do all that I have done, and even greater things." It's in every one of us. Every one of us has this capacity to do it. And I stand up here knowing that this is true. See, I know because before I ever showed up here on this planet, I had a conversation with my source, with God. And God said, "What do you want to do this time around?" Because in an infinite world, you get an infinite number of chances at this. And I said, "I'd like to teach self-reliance." And God said, "You really want to teach self-reliance for a whole lifetime?" It's all I've ever done, 62 years later. "You sure you want to teach self-reliance?" I said, "Yes, that's exactly what I'd like to do." He said, "Well, then we better get your little ass into an orphanage. And you better spend a good 10 years there, and you better learn how to rely upon yourself. And once you know how to rely upon yourself, you'll be able to teach it. But if you're waiting for somebody else to teach it, or you're waiting for the right things to show up," and learning self-reliance was what's the great benefit. When people say it must have been a hard time for you as a child, I said, look, when you're 6 years old, you don't wake up every morning and say, "Oh my God, I'm an orphan again today. Why does this happen to me, not everybody else?" You don't do that. You get up and you do whatever you do when you're 6. And then you turn 40 a week or two later, Seems like it, doesn't it? And then you look at your life and you say, oh my God, I got all of these problems and my wife doesn't understand me and my kids they just think I'm a jerk and I'm addicted to this and I'm poor and I don't have all these bills. Why is that? Someone said, why is your life so messed up? Well, what do you expect from me? You know, I was an orphan, you know. Or my mother liked my sister better. Or Sarah Lee made me fat or something that is back there in our past we rely upon when in fact we are nothing more than the product of the choices that we make.